New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
It's Ebro in the morning. Laura Stiles, Rosenberg. We have Cecile Noel. Am I saying it right?
Yes, you are.
Give it up one time. She is the commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence.
That is correct.
A very long title, but a necessary one.
That is a really long title, but a really necessary name.
Your office reached out to us when we were having discussions around R. Kelly and how young girls are taken advantage of in society. This is not a new phenomenon, even though we're seeing, obviously, because of social media now, more people trying to learn, more people being vocal or feeling safe being vocal about things they've been through and been traumatized with. And your office reached out so that we could delve deeper into what's really going on out here because you deal with it firsthand.
That's absolutely true. And I think this film gives us an opportunity for communities to start to have a conversation about this issue. Just as you said, it really affects every community across the city and across the nation. And the more that we can talk about it, the more we can be aware of how we need to look at this and respond in better ways as communities.
So what are you guys, take us through what you guys are normally doing, the kinds of things you're dealing with and the frequency with which crimes are being reported.
Well, crimes are being reported all the time. And just to understand my office a little bit and put some context, we've been around since 2001 as the mayor's office to combat domestic violence. With our expansion, we have taken on additional responsibilities, additional areas. The First Lady and the mayor is very committed to making sure that victims, survivors really have the resources they need. So what do? We do a lot of training across the city so that everyone understands what these issues are. So the issues of not only intimate partner violence, but trafficking, stalking, sexual violence. So we do trainings across city agencies and community partners, faith-based organizations. We also do a lot of outreach in communities to talk about this issue. Let's get communities talking about it. Then we also have places called our family justice centers, where we do direct services with survivors to help them access the services they need. Counseling, legal services, wellness services, a whole cadre, immigration services if they need, all free of charge, all confidential. We have a center in every borough.
Wow.
In your experience living here in New York City, right, and I've been told that there are deep cultural, let's start here, in families, I guess, almost approval in some ways of how teenage girls get treated by older men. Have you seen that firsthand? And where it's almost in the family, it's in the culture where these things are kind of glossed over when young girls are traumatized.
I think families and cultures come with different practices and different experiences. But what we know are healthy behaviors and healthy things that we want to go on in families means that we have to talk about these issues. And we have to understand what's healthy for children, what's healthy for young people and girls growing up. And those are the behaviors that we want to condone and promote in every way possible. And it begins with talking about it, right? It begins with saying,
so the answer is yes, you've seen it.
The answer is that there are practices in many families that vary across cultures.
And what about in the religious accusations we hear? How how frequent is that? You know, we hear it in the news, right? You hear about priests and young boys. There was something that happened here in East New York. A girl put up a video saying that there was a pastor doing X, Y, Z. And obviously when you have faith tied to an instance, I guess what I'm trying to get at is sometimes our love for something, right? Whether it's our family's, credibility, fighting for legacy and name, cause, or even we had a conversation up here with an artist where we were talking about R. Kelly, where it was we got into having a conversation around how Black communities have often wanted heroes so bad that we never wanted to talk about the bad attributes that they had because we wanted to make sure that Black folks were celebrated because we were always getting torn down. So we look past these things. How
We can't look past these things,
Right.
right? And faith leaders are leaders. They're leaders in our community, and we look up to them just like many other leaders. And we need to hold them accountable in ways that are appropriate, in ways that are right, in ways that don't victimize people within their community or their church or their families. That's why we're here. We're here to talk about these issues and make sure that survivors who are experiencing this, victims who are experiencing these issues, can come forward.
Do you feel like people feel safer now because the conversations become more mainstream?
I feel that people will listen, that they feel like somebody will listen
right.
and actually hear me
Right,
and
right,
maybe
right.
give me some help. And that's what we're about.
Can you talk about how healthcare providers are helping human trafficking victims?
In fact, I'm glad you asked that question. We just had a roundtable last week with healthcare providers from across the city to really talk about how their screening and their assessment for healthcare services needs to include questions around trafficking and how do we do that. And so we are working with healthcare providers across the city to improve that process and link them also to community resources to help them respond and give survivors, victims, places that they can go and get help.
So here, what I didn't know, or quite maybe I didn't understand, human trafficking is defined by the use of power and control to force, defraud, or coerce someone into engaging in labor or services, including commercial sex or sexual activity. I always thought trafficking was like the moving of a human, like specifically from one location to another for the purposes of sex or these jobs. But this sounds like it doesn't even have to be that.
It doesn't even have to
It
be
could
that.
be-
It could include that, but it doesn't even have to be that.
Right. And so that includes the pimping and the prostitution and all of that, even if you don't leave the neighborhood you're from.
That's exactly true. That's exactly true.
How much of what we hear about young girls going missing, I remember, how many years ago was that? There was like 12 young girls went missing in the
Yeah,
Bronx.
there was a story about, it was particularly in the Bronx area, and it was like 12 Black and Puerto Rican or young, between the ages of like 12 and like 16 that were gone missing.
And the community was outraged.
Yeah,
right?
because it
And
wasn't
then,
really being reported on.
I don't know how long you've been in this job, but do we ever find out what actually happens in these scenarios where, a lot of people go, oh, it's just runaways and this and that. And then I think we sat here like, nah, I think these young girls are being taken advantage of.
Sometimes we do. I mean, we clearly have a police department here who understands the issue of human trafficking and is out there and responding. Sometimes we do. But sometimes, just as you said before, what traffickers do is move them across the country, up and down 95 or to another part of the country, and we may not hear from them. But the community needs to understand that our young people, our young girls, our young people in general are much more vulnerable, and we need to be talking about it. We need to alert them to some of the signs. We need to have conversations so that they know that this exists. This was a terrible thing that happened a long time ago. I don't know the result of those 12 girls,
Yeah.
but clearly that was devastating for that community. And we need to figure out how we engage communities more, which is what our office is about understanding, responding, knowing the resources. How can we come together across agencies and across the city to really address it?
Do you guys deal with, parenting teenagers, right? Parents and teenagers are at odds over whatever needs to be happening for that teenager or their schooling or, whatever discipline. You have 14, 15, 16, I hear is a vulnerable time,
Very
really vulnerable time because then you have the runaway and they think they know what's good and I'm grown now and they end up in these sex professions and human trafficking. Do you guys work with families on that?
We do. We work with parents. We do training for parents. We have an initiative with foster care parents to really help them know and understand the signs of trafficking, knowing what to look for. We work with young people who are in foster care. We work with young people who are engaged in the juvenile justice system. We're looking for youth who tend to be vulnerable because of their histories or maybe experiences so that we can begin to dialogue with them and have them understand, as well as their caregivers, which could be their actual parents or parents that are, or family members that are taking care of
So
them.
what are some of the signs? If you have a teenager and things are getting tough in the house and it's a breakdown in communication, what
Well, we know that youth, especially, who are disconnected from family networks, who are in some of the systems that I mentioned, be it juvenile justice or history of child protective or child welfare systems, tend to be at increased risk simply because of their isolation. We also know that, immigrants who are maybe undocumented,
Right.
unable to speak the language, are also at risk. We know that gay, lesbian, transgender, gender nonconforming youth and individuals are also at risk.
Because of the isolation also, right?
Exactly. The isolation, the trauma that they may have experienced. We also know that individuals who come from war-torn places, who have experienced severe violence, be it in childhood or histories of that, are also at increased risk. So there are risk factors that contribute to this that make certain populations just a little more vulnerable.
When you look at the history of America, but it looks, I mean, I go to other countries also where the human trafficking is, I mean, some of the worst places. Respected nations too that have, I think Japan is very high with just, the sex workers and human trafficking and things like that. I know America likes to talk about changes we want to make, right? Culturally. How much do you see people really willing to do the work to change
Well, I think
what is a part of our history, right?
Well, your having me on this show right now is a part of the willingness to have this conversation, right? It's a part of the willingness to say, this has to change. Our office is here to say, this has to change. We're working across the city, and you know what? New York is saying we are a beacon for the rest of this country about how we have to change. We're one of the first offices in the nation to be as expansive as we are in addressing this issue. The de Blasio administration is saying we're going to be that beacon on the hill as a city, showing every other city how they can really embrace this issue and move it forward.
Were you, in your experience in this role, have you seen decreases? Have you seen increases recently? Are there economic factors that drive this?
There are many economic factors that drive a myriad of things. So let's understand increases and decreases. This issue is so underground in a way and difficult to uncover that any number that we give will be underreported because that's what it is. People face shame. You have traffickers who are isolating them, watching them, making sure they don't talk to anyone, making sure that they do what they're asked to do. So we're talking about an issue that is severely underreported. And so our job is to get the message out so someone hearing this, who's experiencing this, can know that they have some resources in the city they can turn to.
And how would they reach out to you guys? What's the
Okay,
best way
so
to do that?
let's start there. So we've got our website, and that's wnyc.gov, NGBV, which is our name, the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. We also have a Hope portal, which is NYC Hope, where there are listings of resources that anyone can access across the city, not just government, but community-based resources that can help you with the whole issue of human trafficking, be it from a survivor or someone who just wants to learn more. And we also have our family justice centers that I mentioned earlier that are walk-in, free, no appointment needed, absolutely confidential to talk about this issue. And so we hope that anyone out there hearing this can really think about those services and how they can access. And if they're in danger, they should call 911.
Some numbers for everybody, just so you know how rampant this issue is. It says here, New York City continues to be both a gateway and a destination for trafficking. An estimated 403,000 people are living in trafficking situations in the United States. That's according to the Global Slavery Index, 2018. Didn't even know we had an index for that. Globally, sex and labor trafficking are estimated to be a $150 billion industry with approximately 40.3 million victims. That's according to the International Labor Organization. So, when you have these conversations and, as we're about to wrap, it almost feels so daunting. You don't even know how to close this conversation with action items for the audience other than looking for clues in their own families and communities and trying to help people who want the help. Because that's another
issue. Yeah.
right? Because there was an organization called Glow here in the city that many years ago I worked with, and they were active with young girls who were in that lifestyle. And you would often hear girls articulate that while it was violent, being, with their pimp or whatever lifestyle they were in, and they knew they weren't happy, it was better than their home life. And reconciling that reality for a young girl of like, the people I trusted the most, my family, were harming me, so at least I'm getting paid in some way, shape, or form. It just feels like a never-ending abyss of like trying to figure out how to pull people out of that.
But we know we can do it, right? We know that we start one survivor at a time, and we're going to make headroads on this issue by having communities be more involved, be more aware, having parents be more involved and more aware, having schools be more involved and more aware. So that's how we start to move the needle on really changing this, having teachers be more involved and more aware. And thanking all of you for making it possible for us to really talk about this important issue in this month in particular, which is Human Trafficking and Stalking Awareness Month.
Did not know that.
January.
just
And
doing
it's a whole month of highlighting. So
Yeah, I
we've
did
had a
not know
whole
that. We
month
was
of
just
highlighting.
on it. Okay, cool. Well, glad to be a part of it and highlighting it. Her name is Cecile Noel, Commissioner of the New York City Mayor's Office to End Domestic Violence and Gender-Based Violence. It was a pleasure meeting you.
Pleasure.
And,
Thank
and
you
those
so much.
that website one more time, or
Okay.
number one more time.
Okay, our website is nyc.gov, NGBV, ENDGBV, right?
ENDGBV.
Or you can go to nyc.gov, NYC Hope.
NYC Hope.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
for
Give
your
it up
work.
one time, you
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you.